Balenciaga, a brand that's probably got you feeling some type of way. You either love it or hate it, and no in between. And it seems like fewer people are feeling the love for Balenciaga these days. Back in the day, it was hailed as the most hyped luxury brand by a mile. But for the past 3 years, it's been slipping down the ranks according to List. But even if it slides off, it's still one of the world's top-selling luxury brands, and one of the most knocked-off brands on counterfeit sites, because everyone, no matter their bank balance, has got eyes on Balenciaga. In recent years, the brand was all over celebs, athletes, and influencers, but now it's everywhere. And this overexposure got its fair share of haters. Their clothes get criticized for being fugly. When we listen to the haters, they say the designs, colors, and even the cuts are mid. The quality is just nowhere near luxury standards, sometimes straight up embarrassing. There's no doubt it split people into two sides, the diehard fans keeping the brand trendy, and the haters who see it as a massive fraud. Yet ironically, they also help hype up the brand by constantly yapping about it. So, who's right? Is Balenciaga's world more complex than we think? And does it deserve its success? Or is it just peddling overpriced crap? Personally, I've got some opinions on this whole thing.
What's popping?
New vid. Today we're diving into Kanye West's former favorite brand, Balenciaga. No doubt the brand's super unique and dishes out stuff way off from what you'd expect from a major luxury house. It almost feels like a social experiment gone wrong. Like, real wrong. So many of their pieces and outfits make zero sense. Like they were randomly churned out by ChatGPT. Even the guy with the worst taste in the world wouldn't rock a garbage man's uniform with knight armor boots and a red PlayStation cap, especially not if it cost them more than a college tuition. Yet Balenciaga had the audacity to drop this bullshit without anyone in the company being like, isn't this just going a bit too far at this point? And the cherry on top is that the dude behind it is seen as a genius. We've seen so many monstrosities from Balenciaga that we couldn't possibly cover them all in this video. If you're only following the brand from a distance, it's these crazy pieces you're gonna hear about. But to really get what the brand's about, and so I'm not just seen as some dumbass hater, we're going to need to dig deeper. And for that, as usual, let's take a little trip back in time for some historical context on this Parisian brand that actually started in Spain. It all began in the early 20th century with Cristobal Balenciaga, who got into sewing through his mom. And soon the student surpassed the teacher, recognized as a prodigy. At just 12, he was already designing for Spain's noble families after the Marquis de Casa Torres challenged him to replicate one of her high fashion dresses. And of course, our little generational talent of sewing nailed it. He then trained with big time designers in Madrid and Paris before launching his brand in 1917 when he was just 22 years old. And we're talking haute couture, not screen printed hoodies. He was still based in Spain, still taking trips visiting Paris for inspiration, but the Spanish Civil War in 1936 forced him to relocate to Paris. There, he totally rocked the haute couture scene with his innovative, never-before-seen designs. When big names like Christian Dior were creating clothes that hugged the female form, Cristobal Balenciaga was all about his iconic tonneau line, which means barrel in French, totally going against the grain, with little to no regard for the human body's lines, but barrels instead.
What is that?
He was a minimalist who sculpted shapes and silhouettes with minimal stitching and quickly became the big name in French fashion, outshining other French couturiers to the point where he, the Spanish immigrant, was chosen to design uniforms for Air France in the 60s, and 30 years later, the brand would even dress the SNCF, aka the French National Railway Society. I think you Americans might not know much about trains and public transport, considering y'all drive your 6,000-pound trucks 5 hours to grab your genetically modified 2 gallons of muscle milk straight from a cow who's been on the same juice as Sam Sulek. Woo! He was rewarded with the Legion of Honor, and his name was eternally etched in the fashion world. But he eventually passed away in 1972. The brand continued without him, riding on his image and reputation. But that was only for a few years, as the brand began to decline in the late 80s, like most haute couture brands of that era, which all seemed to be on their last legs. Around the same time, Bernard Arnault was snatching up the Bussac Group to get hold of Dior. Meanwhile, Balenciaga was acquired by the Bogart Group, which revived interest in the brand with a new strategy and a string of designers taking turns at the helm. First, there was Michel Goma, who didn't really bring anything groundbreaking to the brand's history. Then Josephus Thinmister. Bro's name was taken straight out of that Gladiator movie, but instead of slashing dudes in the Coliseum, he decided to tailor cute dresses for a living.
Be a man.
It was years later when Nicolas Ghesquière took over, staying for about a decade. A total dictator, but adored in the fashion scene, restoring Balenciaga's glory. In the meantime, Gucci acquired the brand, then Kering scooped up both brands in the 2000s during the luxury wars between Kering and LVMH. Super interesting stuff, by the way. We did this masterclass of it on Bernard Arnault, you gotta see. It almost hit 1 million views on our French channel, even descendants of the Vuitton family loved it. But seems like the English speakers don't give a damn. Y'all are missing out big time. Back then, Balenciaga was far from the weirdness it is today. It appealed to fashion aficionados, but was kinda meh to everyone else. The guy they called the spiritual son of Cristobal Balenciaga gave us some classic pieces, but when it came to sneakers, our buddy Ghesquière mostly dropped absolute bricks. In 2012, Alexander Wang came in to level up the sneaker game at Balenciaga with his streetwear vision. He was behind the Balenciaga Race Runner, and even though it's unknown to many, he was the guy behind the speed trainers that were a hit back then. But for the rest of his work, he didn't really wow anyone, and after just 3 years, he was thrown out the door. And then Demas Balenciaga came along, and that's when things really went nuts. I mean, with Alexander Wang, it went nuts too, but it's a whole other type of nuts, if you know what I mean.
No lo entiendo. I don't understand.
Making this guy the creative director at Balenciaga was a counterintuitive move since his work at Vetements was light years away from Balenciaga's aesthetic at the time. You might have thought he'd adapt his vision to fit the brand, but surprisingly, he did the opposite and totally imposed his anti-capitalist, anti-trend vision, selling you $400 tees and becoming the trendiest brand. So it's hard to tell if his vision's a total fail or a success, but he's probably the most profitable designer in the brand's history. Makes sense since Balenciaga, like Gucci, aims for ostentatious luxury. For these brands to work, they need to be expensive, recognizable, and ensure everyone knows how pricey their stuff is. Demas Balenciaga found the cheat code to the spotlight with exaggerated, experimental fashion, where many of his products became memes or headline makers with titles like "This ugly thing costs thousands." Some, like the Balenciaga Triple S or Track, became hits even though they seemed like bad jokes at first. Believe it or not, even the people behind it didn't have faith in the Triple S before its release. But most of these outlandish products are just marketing tools, not meant to be profitable, but to get the brand talked about, and, of course, to push those $400 tees and caps with giant logos or slightly more wearable pieces than night armor. To understand his bizarre-looking clothes, you need to know his inspirations. Before fashion, Demas Balenciaga studied economics and was supposed to become a banker before drastically changing course. That's why you see lots of references to finance and politics in his creations. But there's a ton of everyday life inspiration, breaking fashion norms by representing the spectrum of people you'd see in any European city, from the rushed bank employee in a terribly fitted suit to the local pub's drunk middle-aged dudes. That's why he reinterprets basic, everyday clothes, like transforming a pair of Lonsdales into Balenciaga Zens, or the Balenciaga Runner, literally a pair of Asics. You can even spot the deconstructed Asics logo on it. If we're brutally honest about Balenciaga, their products are aesthetically questionable, to put it nicely, and that's intentional from Demna, a major player in what's called ugly fashion. The cuts are disastrous, with disproportionate oversize going in all directions, and he, by some Hail Mary masterclass, managed to create clothes that look bad on absolutely everyone. And let's not even start on the value you get for your money. You know all about luxury brand schemes by now, and Balenciaga's no saint. Using loads of synthetic materials and manufacturing much of its stuff in Eastern Europe, China, and even North Africa, which isn't necessarily a sign of poor quality, but when you're paying luxury prices, you don't expect your sneakers to be made in a factory in the depths of Shenzhen or by French Montana's uncle. But beyond the product itself, people often want to hype up Demas Balenciaga's work by linking it to some kind of deep political message, when in reality, he's all about smooth, parodic stuff that never goes all the way, you know? Basically, dude makes deliberately ugly clothes, slaps PlayStation logos on caps, or remixes politician Bernie Sanders' logo, while others like Vivienne Westwood throw wild stuff out there, straight up calling politicians criminals or supporting real political causes. To me, his work is overrated because the message has no depth, no real substance. What are you even saying by making goofy boots straight out of Cartoon Network? Bags that look like Lay's chips or Ralph Lauren sweaters soaked in shit. These creations are obviously not too exquisite, and when you take his Lay's bag or those trash bag designs, it's beyond subjective. There would have been something in making the ugly or mundane beautiful, because finding aesthetics when you're telling a story is a challenge. It's tough to take a trash bag and make it beautiful, or the clothes of some random dude from his neighborhood in Belgium and do the same. But this guy leans into the ugliness and just rides on his authority. I'm Demna. I'm Balenciaga. I set the trends. Here's a trash bag. Here's a crappy Lonsdale pair no one gives a damn about. Still made of plastic in China. But now that it has a Balenciaga logo and a jacked up price of $500, so suddenly it's fashion. To me, it's all just artificial crap. Similar to the bullshit you find in contemporary art that mostly speaks to an elite or pseudo-elite who convince themselves they like this improbable crap out of a pure elitist disdain, with a view disconnected from reality. And we saw this clearly with that pedo ad scandal. Just a bunch of dubious choices by people who can't see the problem with placing kids around toys. And this scandal sums up a lot about Balenciaga. When you're all about excess without boundaries, reality catches up real fast. Sure, the boycott lasted as long as a TikTok trend, but I think the fall of Demna's Balenciaga is not far off. We've seen all there is to his vision, and we're gently moving on. The truth is, at Balenciaga, Demas Balenciaga is just a hoodie and t-shirt salesman who can occasionally drop a bestseller among thousands of crappy items no one buys. Like those hideous Balenciaga Zens. Not trying to ignore his talent or his impact on fashion and trends, because we gotta admit, he's been put in a position to have such an impact, but his vision is just too extreme a lot of the times. In short, if we have to sum up Balenciaga, it's a brand with real history and legacy that justifies its prestige and legitimacy in selling you $400 t-shirts. But in recent years, the brand has taken a more experimental turn with Demas Balenciaga, who's kinda gone on an ego trip, trying to impose a crazy vision of design that obviously won't please everyone. Almost like a mad dictator. And all of a sudden, I kinda get why he got along with Kanye. It's still a very creative brand that offers innovative products and goes against the current trends, and yeah, low-key, it's cause of his too extreme vision. I don't know if you've noticed, but a year or two ago, almost all luxury brands went back into the 80s and started releasing basketball or skateboard shoes. Meanwhile, Balenciaga decided it'd be better to go just a little further back in time with medieval stuff, I guess? Today, Balenciaga is like an iceberg, with the visible part of its products being kinda random, funny, interesting, ridiculous, whatever. But the rest is mainly fashion merch. It's basically a factory churning out crap that funds Demas Balenciaga's schizo outbursts and his alien-ass creations. And as long as it's profitable, it'll keep going, I guess. So, are Balenciaga products worth buying? If you're loaded with cash and have questionable taste, maybe yeah. Personally, even though I just spent like 10 minutes trash-talking them, I like to see what they come up with. Obviously not to buy it. I mean, y'all are gonna have to subscribe a whole lot before I'll drop 10K on a garbage bag. But let's not kid ourselves, this brand is either merch or really ugly products that's pretty much laughing in their customers' faces. Unless you're really into that experimental fashion vibe and can find meaning or aesthetics in even the weirdest stuff, I'd say it's better to avoid spending your dough on this brand, cause let me tell you, it'll age like milk. The same as all the extreme trends, but hey, you do you, I guess.
All y'all music ass, at this point y'all should've quit. When I started out, people told me I should quit. When I started out, people treated me like shit. Now I walk in and they treat me like the shit. If I would've doubted me, then I would be pissed. Now I'm coming up, bitch, I'm getting really